going to call the meeting to order of the Ethics Commission of June 28, 2023. Roll call, Dawn Kirshner.
Here.
Vanessa Cano.
Here.
And William Kernan.
Here.
And Shelley Durkold is here. First up is minutes approval. Anyone who would like to
I
make a
move
motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public comment, I don't think there's anybody here. Okay. On to new business, and we don't really have any, right, Scott, that you're aware of?
Correct.
Okay. So first up under old business is the operating policies and procedures review and update. So Scott?
Okay, let me take it away, and it's on the screens, so if you want to refer there. This really started off with one change that we knew about, but as I went through it, there were several additional changes and clarification and corrections that I saw. So we're going to walk this through. Two of the corrections normal told me shouldn't be made, so we'll point those out. And I'm sorry, Dan, it's, when for whatever reason, it's not, let me just try to reload it. It's coming up blank, so.
So we did the same thing on my computer.
Okay. So it's Word
When I
version.
printed it, it was there.
Okay. All right. So here we go. Really, the first change comes on page 11. Motion sick by scrolling down. This really is in 12.04A. There's just a minor correction. Let me zoom in a little bit here. The reference to the section was incorrect, so I'll just make it a simple correction. It should be I instead of N. Okay. Then the next correction, and this is what we considered last time. This is the section 12.05, sufficiency of the complaint. It adds respondent's response. And this is important because this is just reflecting the current process. In the past, when somebody filed an ethics complaint, the respondent didn't get a chance to provide their side of the story before it went to the Commission for Sufficiency Review and Probable Cause. When the ordinance was revised, they said, well, that's not entirely fair because you're only getting one side of the story, and the respondent doesn't have a chance to provide their side before you get to see it at that first meeting. So this, the ordinance was changed to add that. This simply reflects what that current process is, and it's important to note that that document, the respondent's response, will be made as part of the record when it comes to you, so this just simply updates it. All right. Moving on page 14. This is actually this is where Norm is going to say that is incorrect because I use the term refers. So this is regarding the order. You issue an order, you make a finding after the sufficiency of complaint, and when you refer the matter to the state's attorney's office, you actually just refer it. Is that right, Norm?
Yeah, the S is, it should just be that you have that you determine that probable cause exists and refer the complaint. Well, it's not and refer, so yeah, it should just, no, that's not, just grammatical.
So we're going to eliminate those, disregard those changes, if you could, please. Then we move on to page 17. This is with respect to, it's a venue and hearing is the title of the section. Really, so there was a conflict, not a conflict, but there wasn't a parallel between your ability to go into executive session. You always have that ability under the Open Meetings Act, and there's specific requirements. If you're dealing with personnel, that's one of them. You have that ability. The way your procedures were read or we're reading, is under the sufficiency complaint, it said deliberations will be closed. And so you had no choice. Basically, your procedure was saying you have to go into executive session. Well, the change is that they may be closed, and then I add, if such closure is in accordance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act. So, because then you may not need to go, and if your procedure making you go in and it's not in accordance with the OMA, that would be a violation. So this, I think, is an important correction. And to show what I was saying, in the administrative hearing, it's actually, I use the same language because your administrative hearings say the deliberation may be closed. So I'm just really putting those two into sync and giving you the ability, but not the requirement under sufficiency. And then
Just make sure in that section, when you refer to the Illinois Open Meetings Act, that you're putting in italics, like, you have, I don't know, would you paragraphs?
all right,
There you
done.
go.
Thank you. And then let's see,
Is it Meeting Act or Meetings Act?
Open Meetings Act.
C says meeting.
Yeah, and 4 lines up, there's a typo.
Oh.
That's open singular.
Oh.
The top of C, it says Open Meeting Act.
Oh, and B.
Yeah. Is it meetings or meetings?
I think it is meetings. Tom, can you?
Yeah, I'll check that real quick.
Oh, this is Tom Cahill. For people that don't know, Tom Cahill's, he's in the civil division, and he and I kind of tag team on the ethics commission.
Okay, I
Tom
got it.
Cahill's been in the office, what, about 10 years now, Tom?
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
Goes fast. Let's see, yeah, they're calling it the Open Meetings Act under the,
All right. So I made those two corrections.
ILCS 120/2.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. I was testing. And then the final change is on page 20, which is 12.17. And this is the timeline in which you have to make your decision. It just said, we'll render your decision within 30 days. Business days, calendar days, so this just clarifies you have 30 calendar days to render your decision. Just clarify so it takes that ambiguity out. And then that is what I am recommending as far as changes to your procedures, except for the flow chart. So, any questions, or is there anything additional that you've seen, or that you want to change, or any questions you have? Okay, that's great. Yeah. All right.
And then what exactly is this section called? I mean, the title of this, if you're referring to it?
This is the Ethics Commission Operating Policy and Procedures.
Okay, just,
And this is available online when you go to the ethics page. And what's important to note about this document is this is yours. The Ethics Commission can make changes to this. You can change your procedures, however you deem appropriate, as long as they're in line with the ordinance. But the ordinance doesn't talk about the process. The ordinance talks about what's required, what's regulated. This is really how you're going to do it, how you're going to administer a complaint. And I bring that up because I'm making recommendations for changes, and you have the full authority. You have the purview to make these changes. Now, if there are changes to the ordinance, they have to go to the county board. You can make a recommendation to the county board that they change it, however you deem appropriate, but the county board ultimately makes that change. So it's an important distinction between the two documents that run with the Ethics Commission.
Can I make that a point too, Scott?
Mhm.
That is, if there happens to be a conflict between the ordinance and these policies and procedures, the ordinance trumps, the ordinance prevails.
Thank you, Norm. Okay. Anything further? All right, I'm going to move to the,
Yeah, I'm supposed to have this.
the big kahuna.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, I know it's a bit of an eye chart, and even on the screen, it's still a bit of an eye chart. I think the intent was to put the process on paper, literally and figuratively. So that's what we did. I want to thank Kathy for her great assistance in making all this look somewhat okay. I guess we could still, a lot could be still, there's still a lot to be desired with how it's presented, but I would suggest to just incorporate it into the procedures now, and we can make it, maybe Kathy and I can work on a better way, a more clear way. Yeah. Well, even, I mean, I guess we can even summarize it too. This is pretty comprehensive.
Right, this is like, it includes literally everything. It's
Yeah.
almost like, for somebody who's trying to read it and see like a simple, like, how does this
Uh-huh.
work? Like, you almost need like a summarized version.
We'd be happy to go back to the drawing board and take off a lot of the stuff, right? But the intent, I wanted to capture everything, put it on there, and then we can always
Right.
decide if you, I certainly appreciate your direction on how to do so. Let me just walk through what I presented and how. So we have a legend, it's color coded because there's different steps. The first step is the initial complaint when it's filed. Then the second step would be the sufficiency of complaint, probability of cause examination. The initial filing is in dark blue. The sufficiency procedure is in green. If in any point the complaint process ends, that's in orange. You'll see where it ends in a couple places. The administrative hearing is in kind of like a burnt orange, burnt sienna. And then during the procedures, there are some tools or processes available to the commission, and there are some tools and processes available to either party. And this is, I guess, where it gets really messy, because I endeavor to capture those components. And if you sort of strip those away, trust me, I will be happy to do so, because I really would streamline this whole chart. But with that, so we're walking away I'll walk through the very high level. Complaint, first step, complaint gets filed with the Deputy County Administrator's Office. Immediately, that gets forwarded to the Chair of the Ethics Commission. Chair's going to review it to determine if the complaint meets the criteria for a complaint, and then has the ability to dismiss sua sponte. And that's why if for whatever reason the chair says, you know what, the complaint is 5 years old, something that happened 5 years ago, it's not under the ordinance, then the chair can dismiss sua sponte, and immediately then, I send a copy of the complaint, the dismissal to the complainant, copy to the respondent and to the commission. Or if everything looks good and the chair says this proceeds, then I send a copy out to the respondent by certified mail, and this is where the respondent has an opportunity to put in their response. So tell their side of the story, basically. They have 21 days to do so. Once the chair says, this is going to move forward, there's a lot of stuff here, the commission has the ability to appoint the commission has the ability to, once the respondent gets it, the respondent can say, hey, they got me, I did it. Then you can enter in what's called a consent agreement, which basically they're going to plead guilty without going through the whole process. In essence, I'm using terms. And then you can say, well, you know what, the penalty is this, or your fine is this, and that has the same weight as if they were going through the whole process, the administrative hearing, and found guilty. So the consent agreement is a process that you have.
Okay. So hold on, because it's just sitting over there.
Mhm.
But if they enter into this consent agreement, what step do we go to next? We don't go then to the 21 days to respond and 7 days. I mean, it doesn't continue on. So where do we go from there?
You know what? That would be another terminus. So that's a good point. I missed that. Thank you. Then we would do. I need to amend it to add an orange box under here, basically saying the complaint's over, because it's resolved at that point in time. So this would be the complaint's been resolved. So
But at some point, we would still have to have a hearing or whatever to determine what their penalty is going to be, or what their, or not maybe a hearing, we would have a meeting Or so, there would be some kind of deliberation to figure out what the penalty would be, and then it gets terminated, right?
And that's why, well, a consent agreement is, yeah, there would be some sort of process, whether it's just meeting with the chairman and the state's attorney office, making a recommendation. You would have some sort of process. I guess I could add in the step that the, ethics.
How do we get to the consent
Right.
agreement, right?
Yeah, because wouldn't the consent agreement actually be then a yellow box? Because it
It-
ends the process, right?
It would be. So that,
Instead of blue.
that would make it, that would make that yellow, orange.
There weren't enough boxes, but.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's a good catch. Good catch. So, but assuming a consent agreement isn't going to occur, then we have we talked about the respondent's response period. Once that response is received, so in 7 days, or at the expiration of the 21 days, I would send out a letter just notifying the time and date of the sufficiency and probable cause examination. So we would work with the chair, and we pull the commission to say when you're available, and then I would incorporate that into the letter. Now, on the right side, there's two processes. There's a process available for the parties, because let's say the respondent knows that, so one of the commissioners is really good friends with the complainant. They say, well, wait a minute, you have a conflict there, and they have a process where they can request a disqualification of the commission member. If that is filed, then the commission would determine whether or not there should be disqualification, and only the 4 members, not the one who's subject to the disqualification, but the other 4 would determine whether or not that disqualification should take place. So that's why I say other members will determine the disqualification request. So that process is available to either party if they sense that we may not get a fair trial. And then it moves on to sufficiency of complaint, probable cause examination. The first step is the commission, then once you sit down, you would do an initial review of the following documents. That would be the notice that was sent out regarding the meeting, the complaint, the respondent's response, which is the change that you just made in your operating procedures, the exhibits or documents appended to the complaint. So if there were photos or whatever supporting documentation they submitted initially, and any waivers of disqualification that were submitted. Then during the process, and really at any time during the process, the commission, either party can ask for a continuance, and the commission can grant a continuance, and even a commissioner can ask for a continuance. So if you feel that it's important to continue this matter, you have that ability too. And as we talked about in the changes to the procedure, you have the ability to close the hearing under Open Meetings Act. I know there's a very limited reason when you can do that, but you have that ability, unless the parties agree to keep it open. So let me say, hey, you got nothing to hide, and that's available to you. But you could close it, which is why it's a process or tool available to the commission. And then we move on to the process based on the evidentiary and supporting materials provided. You determine if further action is warranted. So really, this is a process where once you receive everything, you might say, you know what, we need to further examine or further look at this, or maybe get some additional records. There may be something that you need to do as a commission before you can actually fully understand the complaint that's before you.
Scott?
Yes.
Nowhere did I see, what's the burden of proof in determining whether or not a violation occurred. I assume it's a preponderance of the evidence.
Yes.
And I will refer to, yes.
Yes,
And-
which basically means more likely than not,
Right.
more than 50%. Yes. Yeah.
But at the probable cause hearing, we don't take any testimony, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so
I
then,
think they can make a statement, I think, but no testimony. It's like they can, you're gonna review the documents and they can make a statement as far as what their position is, but
Right.
no testimony.
And they can't provide anything beyond what was already provided to you in the complaint, the respondent, or the document.
well, the reason I asked that is because it says based upon the evidentiary, in that little box there, it says based upon evidentiary and supporting materials.
Yeah.
Should it just be based upon all the document, all the supporting materials submitted?
We can change it, that is directly out of the operating procedures. So,
Yeah. but we don't take any testimony. And we don't determine who's telling the truth.
okay. So then we can just make a change, so based on the,
So does the word evidentiary mean testimony then?
That's because then it's followed by and supporting documents, that's why I just assumed.
So maybe it should just be documents provided.
Right,
Yeah.
or materials provided.
yeah, we'll make a change, so we'll just say basically.
But you said they could make a statement. So
Well,
that's not really documents provided, that's also including
But it's
statements.
not, no.
well, this is, you received everything, you reviewed everything. The next step is their statement. So this is right before their statement. So based on,
Okay.
this is based on, we'll just say materials provided.
But they're not under oath or anything, are they, when they make their statement?
Correct. All this is, no, not at this point. This isn't the hearing. This is just a, should it go to hearing?
Right. Because I understand probable cause, and don't we just look at the documents and everything that's submitted, their statement and their complaint, their response, and we look at it and we say, based upon everything they put in the complaint, there's a reasonable basis to believe that they can prove it.
Yes.
Prove a violation.
With the addition of, each one has the ability to address the commission.
Okay.
Not to get too far into it, prior to the change, the parties never had that opportunity. Now, in public comment, they could come up and say what they wanted to say, but they didn't have it in this process. When the ordinance was changed, this gives them the ability now to present their case rather than be limited to just a public comment.
So where-
Their statements aren't under oath, are they?
No.
So where in this flow chart do they give their statement?
Right, we made a change to the materials, and if no further action or preliminary action is needed by the commission, you can see where it comes down to says no.
Oh, each party has
Commission determines that preliminary action is warranted. If you say no, we're good, then it immediately goes then to each party has the opportunity to address the commission. So this is really kind of like your stuff to say, do we need anything more, or can we move forward? So I can zoom in on the screen, might be a little bit easier to read on the screen. So this is the change that Bill had just read, so we can wipe that out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then, so is there any further preliminary action warranted? You can say no, and then now we have this, together that each party can address that commission.
Okay.
And right.
So we make a determination first based just on the documents, and then we let them present what they want to say, and then we make a determination.
Well, so preliminary action, and this is, it's ability, like I said, if you need additional, if there's maybe an additional question, or before you can move forward, we need to have that answered, or you need to have that answered. That gives you the ability. It's kind of broad, but it puts in the mechanism to say that there may be something out there that the commission needs and wants to review further or look at, or like I said, maybe it's trying to come up with a good example. I don't know, maybe it's there's a timesheet that was submitted saying somebody was working in political campaigning on county time, and do we need to confer with county records to determine is this a county timesheet or something like that. So it could be just something to give you for you to verify what is being provided to you.
So
Right?
that's what those two boxes are.
That's all it is saying. Is there anything any preliminary action that you need to do before you can make that determination whether it's sufficient or there's probable cause? And like I said, in the procedures, you know, there could be situations where you use it. So I'm giving you a kind of a few, you know, hypothetical scenarios. If you say, no, everything is good, because once again, they have the obligation to provide information to you. They're bringing forward the complaint, and the respondent's bringing forward their side. So then they address, and.
So wait, do we take off the word evidentiary?
Yeah, we're going, this is a PDF, so I can't change it.
I understood, but I mean, that is what this says in the operating procedures
So-
as well, so it's like, if we feel we need to take it off,
We should make that change here?
right.
Okay.
So it's on page 12, so it's 12.05, section B.
So based on, we'll just say the supporting, I would just say based on the materials provided.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let me make that change on this document. Nope, not that one. Okay.
Sorry.
All right, well, I appreciate it. No, can we get it right? Okay, so then we slide back into our flow chart. And really just on the face of what's presented to you, the response, the complaint, whatever else is provided, because nothing new can be submitted and brought up during the sufficiency and probable cause examination. Based on what you have, then you make a determination. Did you have one of, depending on the complaint, because it's one of 5 paths. If it's a sexual harassment complaint, you can, well, first off, you can find it insufficient to allege a violation, or the probable cause doesn't exist. And probable cause is defined in the ordinance, and then you can say it's dismissed. Right? So that's step one. If it's a sexual harassment complaint and you feel that there's something there, then you would make a finding that that there is probable cause, the complaint sufficient is probable cause, and the findings are actually spelled out in the operating procedures. And then you would determine whether or not it's going to go to when it's going to go to administrative hearing. And this is really where the hearing takes place. Similarly, if a gift ban act is found to be, there could be something there, could be probable cause, then you can make that determination and finding, and then schedule it for an administrative hearing. But with the gift ban act, you can also say, this might get messy. Then you can make a finding that it's sufficient, the complaint's sufficient, there's probable cause, and then refer them out of the state's attorney's office. And basically, you hand it off to them and say, we found that there's something here. We're going to ask the state's attorney's office then to investigate it and prosecute it accordingly. With prohibited political activity, that's, if you find it sufficient, the probable cause, you have to give it to the state's attorney. So gift ban, you can hold on to it, or you can give it to them if you want. Sexual harassment, you do the administrative hearing. Probable cause, you give it to them. So those are the 5 possible routes based on the type of complaint. And so once you give it to the state's attorney, the process ends for the Ethics Commission. Now the state's attorneys, they're going to take it. It's going to be up to them whether or not they go forward, or how they want to resolve, what resolution to bring to the complaint. They may choose to prosecute it. They may look at it further, but it basically becomes in their hands. You have to trust that they're going to do what is appropriate with it. Assuming you hold on to the complaint, so then it proceeds to administrative hearing. At this point in time, the chair can appoint a hearing officer. This is an important step because, as Bill was saying as the attorney, this is it's a legal process, and and somebody could be subject to penalties based on your outcome, and you need to be fair and give appropriate due process. It's plausible that each are going to have legal representation. And, attorneys are going to do what attorneys do. They're going to, advocate for their client and, vehemently argue one way or the other.
Obfuscate.
Is that?
Obfuscate.
Obfuscate that. So this is where it's important that, depending on the nature of it, you may want to have a hearing officer, which would be an attorney who knows administrative process and basically serves as, as really that point of contact to control the hearing, to control the parties. And so when you get into evidence and you get into, all the things, and with all due respect to the attorneys in the room, if there's attorney games that are being played, they're going to see that and be able to, help keep things under control. If you're not legally trained, that may put the chair in a difficult position to, you have to referee between the two. Also, it allows the chair to sit back with your other commissioners and absorb everything, rather than trying to run the hearing. You can be that, that observer. You can take in all the information, and contemplate, as opposed to trying to manage the process going on.
So how does the chair appoint a hearing officer?
So this would be informal, and you have the ability to, we'll talk, and if you say I'd like to appoint a hearing officer, board administrator will make that happen. We'll work with the state's attorney's office and say,
Come up with somebody and.
come up with somebody, we'll find, the money, it can't be the state's attorney's office, because they are your legal counsel. They're gonna protect you, so it'd be a conflict of interest if they're gonna be running the hearing as well. So it would be a third party. So it would be, in essence, an outside counsel. So,
Doing what?
was that
Doing what?
running the hearing?
You telling parties to call the witnesses, do this, do that, conduct a,
Yeah, well, let's say if an attorney objects, there's a legal process for objection and the grounds, and, I've done attorneys.
no, but the hearing officer would move, as your attorney on objections, and is it contemplated that's going to be an attorney?
The hearing officer has to be an attorney.
Okay.
Has to be an attorney. And that's by the ordinance. Okay. Once again, as a procedural tool, you can close the matter to the public, unless the parties agree to keep it open. So then when it gets into the hearing, it doesn't immediately go right into the hearing. There may be discovery, and where additional documents need to be called in or subpoenaed. So once again, this is a legal due process. So there's a discovery will take place. It's called a pre-hearing exchange of information. No later than 7 calendar days prior to the hearing, all the parties have to provide a list of their witnesses and copies of the exhibits that they intend to bring forward as part of the hearing. And there are some tools available. Once again, we talked about continuances, because it may take some time to, to make sure that everybody's available or that the parties are available. And there's an important tool. It's called the pre-hearing conference. So before you get into all this, this could get really messy, but there may be some things that both parties can agree to, right? They can agree that on this date, the respondent was here. Okay, so you don't need to prove that. They can come to an agreement and say, we stipulate these facts, we agree to it, we don't have to argue over it. Or there may be just, some mutual agreement on the breadth or scope of what they're looking at. There's some guidance as to what the pre-hearing conference can cover within the procedures. But that's an important tool, because what that does is it's going to help make the administrative process a lot more efficient. And if we can get the parties to agree on facts or this or that, that's going to make everyone's lives a lot easier. It's going to save a lot of time, and I think it's smoother. Now, it's optional, so both parties have to agree to the pre-hearing conference. And then we say, no, we're not going to do it. You can't compel them to do that. But that's a tool that's available, and so assuming we go through that, and there's things to go through, discovery, witnesses, then the matter is actually called up for hearing. And we'll schedule a date and time. We'll have a court reporter. We'll probably have, and then this is where it begins. It does note that sometimes things may be able to move immediately from your sufficiency of complaint probable cause examination immediately to a hearing. That could happen. I guess I would suggest only if both parties agree to that, you do that, but, you want to obviously make sure they have the appropriate due process. But so let's say it gets called to a hearing, and this is really the chronological timeline of the administrative hearing, which you have, as a commission, have the ability to change. This is only in the procedures. You can say, you know what, for efficiency or for this, we're going to not do this, or we're going to take these things out of order. So you have the ability to change the process. Both parties in the legal counsel introduce themselves. Then you make as part of the record the documents, the notice of the hearing, the complaint, the response, and then probable cause findings, determination of findings. Then opening statements are made. The complainant goes first, then the respondent. Then the complainant presents their case first, followed by the respondent. So always, whoever's bringing the charges forward, they're the ones who have to make their case first, and then the respondent gets to respond. During that process, and once again, it's very akin to a court hearing, but it's an administrative process. Oral testimony is taken under oath. So either the hearing officer or the chair will swear them in. The ruling of admission of evidence is made by the chair, or if you have a hearing officer will make that ruling. The commission can exclude evidence if its probative value is outweighed by the undue consumption of time. So let's say the complainant wants to introduce the time cards for the past 15 years of this employee to show some pattern and wants to go through. You might say, what are you going to show? And prohibit that piece of evidence. Because some of these, they can be very tedious. And you may be an opportunity to say, you know what? No, let's not do that. So certainly your state attorney's office is going to guide you on whether or not you should do that. But you have the ability to say, no, time out, that's going to be too much. Because it could drag out for a year.
If I could just go back. I see there's a provision for witness can appear to allow them to take a deposition.
So
Who issues subpoenas?
So this would be, I think actually I would have heard, Norm's not here. Tom, who would issue the subpoena for the commission? Would that be through the state's attorney's office as your legal representative, or would it be the commission itself? They don't necessarily have subpoena authority.
Yeah, so that's, I'd have to look into that, Scott. I would say probably, I'm not sure if the commission would have the authority to do it on that. They might be able to issue a request to appear.
But this is actually a material witness of the complainant, right?
Or it could be the respondent, and that's
But
where we
isn't
go.
it their response?
And that's really the intent of this, if you read it, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
All right.
It's, let's say if, I'm a material witness, but you're gonna do it on, a date, and I know I'm gonna be out of the country. I can't be at the hearing, I can't, I can't provide my testimony, so I can do it, by a deposition. In that way, then my record will be entered as if I'm giving my testimony there. But it really should be a willing witness, not somebody who's, unwilling.
By the same token, some people may not want to get involved in a sexual harassment hearing.
Sure.
And they say, I don't want to say it, but the witness is critical, and the witness was an eyeball.
Yeah.
And the complainant or respondent may want somebody there against their will. So somebody's got to issue a subpoena, and somebody's got to do something to get them there against their will.
So let's, Tom, you can look into it now.
Yeah, I'm trying to determine that right now, Scott.
When the ordinance and the procedures were changed, there was actually a reference to the commission having subpoena authority, and that was perfectly taken out. Because it was arrived at that the commission does not have subpoena authority. So if there's a material witness, can you compel somebody to provide testimony? So we'll get back to you.
We've talked about this before, and that we can't.
So that's why it was
Tell
taken out.
somebody to-
Whether or not,
I feel like this has been covered, and I mean, maybe it was obviously before
right,
some of the people here.
because the question came up again, I'd like to relook
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
But that's, like I said, the old version of the ethics ordinance and procedures did say subpoena, and that was completely taken out for that reason. This is, but this deposition, as Vanessa pointed out, is really if a material witness can't be there. Their testimony is going to be important, they want to testify, but they can't make the date, for whatever reason. This is their ability to provide their testimony on the record.
But there may be a material witness who doesn't want to testify and is going to be out of the country, and you still, you want to hit them with a subpoena for deposition.
So if you can, so we'll note that, if you have the subpoena ability.
But if the material witness is friendly, let's say to the respondent, and said, sure, I'll make a
Mhm.
statement, but I'm not going to be there that day, is a sworn statement the same thing as a deposition? I mean, in other words, we don't want to subpoena them, they're just wanting to document what they saw and have it notarized or something. Is that the right
Well,
path? I don't know.
you would still have them submit a deposition and have them on Zoom or whatever, or video, and record it. And, I mean, if they're gonna submit evidence, the other side would want to cross-examine, I would assume. So, I mean, if it's gonna be a deposition, it's gonna be the whole 9 yards.
And that's actually why it's a deposition, it's supposed to like a sworn statement. Because first off, they have to give it under oath. So they have to be under oath. And Bill points out, they are going to provide it, but they could be cross-examined by the opposing counsel. So that's why deposition gives that ability to go back and forth. Okay. But we'll follow up and we'll reconfirm how the subpoena process works. Like I said,
An alternative to that may be an affidavit, but then sometimes the opposing party might request the ability to depose the affiant, so then kind of run into that problem here.
and I think that's what he's contemplating is just go right to the deposition. That
Right.
way you don't have to go through that additional step. Okay. So moving on, then we have.
One last question. Well, why at the administrative hearing do we consider the probable cause finding?
It's only part of the record, because that's how you got to this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the probable cause finding, like I said, it is spelled out. So here's, for example, so in your after sufficiency review, you actually issue something in writing. It makes an order the finding is said complaint is sufficient, alleged violation, and you're going to identify some of the key reasons why you found it, found probable cause or found sufficient is on its face, but probable cause, why you think it should move forward. But this statement that you determined here is what goes into the record for the administrative review, because that's a separate process. It's the next process. Does that make sense?
No.
All right. I guess let me ask, should it? I mean, should it be included or should it not?
If the ordinance says yes, then I guess we don't have any choice, but, I mean, we made a determination without any evaluation of credibility of witnesses or anything like that, so why do you even look at it?
And I believe that's actually in your procedures as opposed to the ordinance. So maybe it's something to, let me double check that.
I mean, it's not going to hurt. I mean, if the complaint's part of the record, that doesn't really have any evidentiary value.
Right.
So.
What was the respondent's
why would
response?
that be part of the record? Okay, never mind.
Oh.
I'm not going to put it through useless work.
Okay. All right, then matters called for hearing upon Okay. Opening statements, then the case gets put on. We talked about what's available to the commission as far as tools and processes. Each party, this is like seen on TV, they can call and examine witnesses, introduce exhibits, cross-examine, impeach any witness, object for sound reason, and redirection or cross-examine based on the limitation imposed by the commission. I actually, is Norm coming back?
No, he's gonna be gone, but I noticed in the, on the subpoena question, in the underlying law that the ethics ordinance refers to, there's a clause here that says to issue subpoenas with respect to matters pending before the commission, subject to the provisions of this article and the discretion of the commission. So they have subpoena power in the underlying Illinois statute that this or that
So-
our ethics ordinance is based on.
So let me talk to you a bit further about that, because this is kind of extracted out of
Right.
that
That's what-
larger law, and
that's
that
what
law
it's-
applies to different offices, state offices, and you have it because the state, the statute says each local entity shall have an ethics commission and require this and this.
Right.
Prohibit political activity, gift ban, and now sexual harassment. Some of those procedural things do not carry over, so that's why I don't know if that fully applies.
Right.
Okay, so moving on, so the respondents, in this just really talks, they have your typical hearing abilities for each party. Let's talk about hearsay evidence, and it can be used, but it's subject to a timely objection. All right. So then, once they go through, they put on their cases. Then there's the ability to, so they can introduce evidence of rebuttal, because something may have come on. They can say, wait a minute, now, based on, after the complainant closes their case, respondent presents something, then the complainant can say, well, wait a minute, there's evidence in rebuttal to something they said. So they have the ability to come back before you with rebuttal evidence. Then they make closing arguments, and this is out of the procedures. Complaint goes first, respondent, then the complainant can then conclude with a rebuttal. So if the respondent says something in their closing argument, the complainant still has another opportunity to correct that or say something further. And then you make a decision. Within 30, it's now calendar days. We made that change.
Does our procedure really say that hearsay evidence is allowed?
Yes. That is in your procedures.
It's page 19,
Why?
it's like 12.14F.
Okay. I was going to put the references in the flow chart. I thought I had a lot of information and also I didn't. But thank you for finding it so quickly. So yeah. So it does say here, say may be used for the purpose of supplemental responding periods. So it there's a little bit more to it than just putting up hearsay evidence. Obviously, it's going to.
So your finding can't be based solely on hearsay evidence.
Still.
It's sufficient to miss it would be admissible or civil objection. So it's got to be admissible hearsay evidence to stand alone.
I did not include anything about ex parte communications, but just keep in mind as you're going through this, neither side can talk to you, nor should you talk to either side. But that is, that's the flow chart. So obviously I got some corrections to make. And if it's the pleasure of the commission, we can maybe take some of this stuff out of it. We're just looking for some guidance.
I think you did an amazing job, I can't imagine having to undertake doing all of this. So I don't know that I want to, I don't know that I think you need to take a bunch of stuff out, except to maybe have this, but then also have like a more simplified version, so like the average person looking at it.
Okay.
I agree with you, like, I wouldn't want somebody to look at this process and go, yeah, no way, I'm gonna like even
Right.
start going down that road, right? So it's almost like, it needs also something a little more simplified, so
Mhm.
somebody who is thinking about bringing something up isn't totally scared away by what this looks like.
That's.
Well, but in their training, being a county employee, they get an overview of the ethics commission and the policies, right? And how they would file a complaint. So they already kind of, they know the basics. I think this is good for us. I would suggest formatting it into like 3 pages,
Okay.
where like maybe almost like this, like that, just so that somebody could really refer to it and read it versus have, just because it's so much data. Maybe even separate, the blue, the green, and then the orange, so that, it's more readable. But for somebody sitting on the commission to get their first complaint, and if they, just got here, and this would be kind of a great cheat sheet, like, okay, here's what's gonna happen, versus reading the, long,
Okay.
I think so.
Happily, I can do that. I can do like a simplified version, just a really 30,000 foot up of what the process is. And then I can take this and make the corrections that we had discussed and really do it in 3 pages, because it does lend itself to, there's 3 distinct sections.
Right. Very
Well, then
good.
you can make it, so you can actually attach it
Make it big.
like you're supposed to, yeah, right? Like, I don't know how you attach this, yeah. Okay, yeah,
All right.
I think, nice job.
Thank you. All right, I guess we'll have that for your next meeting to review it. And so that leaves you to, we made several changes within the text. I think the way the agenda reads, I think you are able to approve it. Old business. Yeah, so if you wanted to approve those changes that you've already discussed to the text, you can do that. Or if you wanted to wait until you have the exhibit, that's up to you.
I mean, I think we can go ahead and approve the changes to the policies and procedures, excluding Exhibit 1. So unless,
I'll make a motion.
make a motion, any
Okay.
discussion,
Vanessa?
any comment?
We need a second.
I'll second.
Second.
Bill?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we're on to the ethics ordinance training module.
All right. Okay, so when we left off, we actually left off, I believe, at, it's under gift ban acts. I think it was
Item 8 is what I
Item
minutes say.
item 8, that's right.
So my
Okay.
notes say 2 from last time.
But I was asked to rework the exhibit for section 2, or the text for section 2. Rather than talk about like a symphony or orchestra, to make it a Bears game. And so I endeavored to do so. This is the red line version. I did provide, or you can see it in the, I think in a clean version. Let me bring up the clean version for you. And really the question is, does it read better? I took off any reference to scalpers and things like that. And, excellent guidance. And this is why you do this, right? This is why you look at it and you review it, because if it's not clear to you, or if you can make suggestions, the employee who's going to go through this needs to be able to understand. So I think this is a great exercise. So just asking you, did I make number 2 better, or exception number 2 better?
Yeah, I thought so.
I thought it read pretty well. I understood it.
So then we had another minor change to exception 3, and the commission had asked that I incorporate the words for re-election to the county board. Of course, somebody running for the county board, the scenarios are running for re-election to the county board. Because contributions under the election code are permissible. And so I made that change. And I think that was all that we had talked about. So if there's any no other questions, we can just proceed with section 8. Do you want to go through each, or did you just want to hit anything that you've identified in your review?
I did not have any issues. I only noted one other thing from that, so nothing's exceptional for me.
Anybody? Exception 8? Exception 9?
I also had nothing.
Exception 10, intergovernmental gifts. This is like, say, if a municipality gives me something, and it's over $100. Makes sense. Exception 11, just exception 12. This is where, it's important to note about this, because different than the food, it's $75 per day. This is a cumulative total of $100 per calendar year. So if somebody gives me something for $20 today, and then $99 tomorrow, well, that's over $100. So that means the deal fits.
Have nothing on that.
Okay.
On the quiz, can you give what the correct answers are, just to make sure, like, I'm not seeing anything?
They're on the screen.
Okay.
Okay. So, Creative Source gives you a one and only one gift a calendar year, expensive dinner, cost of $125. Is this a violation or is it not? And so this is I think this is an important question, because the exceptions are mutually exclusive from one another. And if somebody gives me a $99 gift today and takes me out to lunch, and the cumulative value is over, this is something on Creative Source, food is mutually exclusive from the gift. But the way the ordinance it reads and has been interpreted is you can add like a gift to food. So let's say if I get an $80 steak dinner. Okay, in fact, question. Yeah, so first one. Yes.
Question 1, it demonstrates what you're about to say.
Exactly, that's it. Because I'm applying my $75 in food, and then the difference in a gift. Now, I only have a remainder left, so if they give me a $100 gift on the road, it's no good.
So usually they put a limit on food.
And that's per day.
Right.
Yeah.
So even though they put a limit on food, you can say that the food, or a portion of the food, was actually a gift. I don't think I realized that. That's crazy. Okay. That seems
Yeah.
counterintuitive. Okay. So I did not answer that right, but at least I understand why.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, because, first off, because it says the exception of mutually exclusive. And that is kind of a loophole.
I was gonna say, there's no way that's how it was intended when it was written, that's just a loophole that they've come up with, that has been interpreted that way over time.
The steak was the food, the beans were the gift.
Or it could be bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Right? Or, I mean, so that's, and I guess you can, because we had that one case that you've gone through that, was, yeah, I guess we're through. The dinner, from a prohibited source, and the wine, question about the value of the wine. So that kind of brought that into it. But a wine, whether you hand me a bottle of wine at Christmas time, or you buy me a bottle of wine with my dinner, it's still a bottle of wine, right? So I guess can you dissect it that way? I guess you could.
So even though I get a gift card at a restaurant that for $200 that I decided to use in 3 days, even though I may split it 75, 75, and 75, it's still a violation.
Yes,
If the gift card is $200.
because food there has to be consumed on premise. So,
Oh, yeah.
so no doggy bag. So if you get that steak and you don't finish it, you can't take it home.
So you can't get you a $75 bottle of wine every day and say that was food because it wasn't consumed on premise.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dinner here
I
is
would-
consumed on premises at the restaurant.
This has nothing to do with like a business trip being paid for by taxpayers where elected officials are going to something that as a part of their role as an elected official. It's not the same because they're being paid by tax dollars.
So-
It's not the same.
Yeah, so that would be, this is only something
not a
that a prohibited source gives you.
Right.
But under the exceptions, if, let's say, as a county board member, a vendor wants to show you, this software system that they have in place, and they want to fly you to San Diego, and it's a, fact-finding mission. There is a path under the exceptions where a prohibited source can provide, travel expenses.
Yes.
So, but in the case of, you said, talk about tax dollars, you would be subject to the county's business travel policy.
Right.
And then if the auditor, sees that it's not compliance, you'll
Oh,
deal with
oh,
that.
Yeah, forget that.
And trust me, she doesn't miss anything.
Exactly.
Not that we tried, it's just, she and her team are very thorough. So there, but there are things that prohibited sources can do, travel and, fact-finding missions, things like that, and really the intent is not to impede, the ability really to conduct, bona fide business for the county and provide some options. It's really just, to prohibit, somebody trying to influence you, right? Truly trying to influence you. Now, the vendor case, I said, well, of course they're trying to influence you when they're going to show you the system, but they're showing you something that's up and running so you understand it, right? And, but it could be covered. They're not saying, hey, I'll give you this, set of.
Okay, now I really want to split hairs. What if the source is another government body who's trying to influence the government body? And they, feed you like 3 great meals a day or something like
Yeah. So that's exception 10. Intergovernmental
Oh, okay.
and intragovernmental gifts. Yeah. The example we put in, so I use like, county board members can give gifts to each other, or they can give gifts to Lake County board members, and that's okay.
So to use that as an example that's in the news, Arlington Heights can give a whole bunch of money to the school district 214 to agree that the tax assessment should be lower than what they're agreeing to right now.
Yeah, so whatever's in your authority to reduce that tax, but in TIF, in TIF districts, it's not uncommon that school districts will enter into an agreement with the municipality that provides additional money, for for property taxes that they'll forego. If you, so you use TIFs. That's a good example. I don't know if you're ever familiar with how TIF districts work. I'm happy to explain it. Probably this isn't the right venue, but it's a redevelopment tool. A lot of municipalities do, but it caps property taxes to other entities. And so a school district only gets, whatever they get today for the next 23 years. This is all they get. But they might say, you know what, we can't do that. And they get money for, for each child that's created, but they can say, you know what, we want that, plus we want 25% of whatever. They can make an agreement along the line that you're talking about.
I don't understand TIF, and that's not what I was talking about.
I see.
Right now, the big problem with the Bears moving to Arlington Heights, where I used to live and I'm a season ticket holder, is that they can't get an agreement on what the taxes should be on the property. So what you do is, the village, if they want to make this go away, they can give a whole bunch of money to a school district to agree that or to the clerk, to agree that the assessment should not be $93 million, but the taxes should be $2 million.
And if they have the ability to pursue state statute, it wouldn't be a violation of their ethics ordinance, assuming there's a sin.
So all Arlington Heights would have to do is have to have a line in their budget for bribery.
I'm sure their legal counsel would advise them to craft it or differently, but
This would have nothing to do with the ethics
that's correct.
Right.
Yeah, and-
ordinance, because it's not a prohibited source giving
Money
to a county employee or a
Yeah,
village
but
employee or
Arlington- yeah,
a
but
government
Arlington-
employee.
Village giving to.
But Arlington Heights is trying to influence the school district because it benefits them in the sales taxes,
So, but and
Intergovernmental agreement rather than bribery.
this is really for an individual. This is an individual getting that benefit, or now if they're giving it to the superintendent or the president of the school district, that may be different because that focuses on the individual. This is really it's to that person, not to the organization. But if they're with another organization, there is an exception. So the second example, I don't know if you answered that. Golfing is allowed. Golf outings are allowed. There's, and I believe that tennis is allowed as well. There, in the state, in the statute, there are carve-outs. Pickleball was invented when that statute was written, but stand by, that may change. But really, the situation in the test is that, not the test, but the question is really, it's the activity associated with political fundraiser. Political fundraisers, as long as it's consistent with that regulation, you can accept it.
Question, wait. Oh, never mind. Never mind.
But there's an important distinction. So let's say Terry's running for re-election, and she says, Scott, come to my golf outing. I said, wow, it's a beautiful day. Sure, I do. I can go to that golf outing, and I would because of that separation of. But if I do, I can't do it on county compensated time. I can't say, hey, Pete, I'm going golfing, and and taxpayers are paying me to be in the golf course at a political event, because then that's a violation. Everyone get that one right?
Yeah.
Okay. Third one, so this
And
is,
just to clarify, even if the green fee was $150, you can still go.
Yeah, I wonder if we should up that number because it's 85, it's listed as 85. It almost seems like, well, I accepted it because it's 85.
Right.
I think what I was really getting at is, it's a part of a political fundraiser.
Right, but I just think by reading it, somebody might say, oh yeah, I can take it because it's not that expensive.
Right.
It's under-
Well, but then they would choose a B, which is you may accept the golf ticket, but only at a reception 12 for gifts under $100 in the calendar year.
Right, but again, then what makes A right?
Well, A is right. If they chose B, they'd be wrong.
But that's the point is, that, well, really, A or B could be right if they're doing it for that purpose. But really, we want A to be right because the point that Scott's trying to make is it's a political fundraiser. I'm just saying, I think it distracts it because it's under 100, so they think, oh, I can accept it because it's under 100, but
But if we change it to 150, then we have to eliminate B, because then your only choice is A or C.
Yeah, that gets really convoluted.
Maybe just in the explanation, which you just simply
That's
say,
good.
you can accept the golf outing regardless of what the green.
yeah, he does say it there. That's true. I think it's there.
Okay. And then the point too is, if it was $85, it doesn't erode my $100 threshold for that private source. So they can still give me a $100 gift the next day.
Awesome.
Yeah, which is an exception to the gift ban is the point. That's the point you're trying to make.
So they can give you the ticket, they can give you $100 from the golf balls.
I was gonna say.
And pay $75
For the meal.
bottle of wine.
So if you, and
That'd be a great day.
I didn't
And
know.
there'll be a bottle of wine for you at the country club.
and buy you steak dinners the next day, and the day after that, so. You see how this gets squishy, right? You just see, the past that maybe before you. So it's gonna be the new ones, and this is where when we talk through this process, that's why a lot of that, you become the arbiter of all this information, interpreting what's in the ordinance, interpreting, what happened, trying to determine based on the evidence. So I know this is really tedious, but, I love the questions because you really understand and comprehending your job. This is great. I hope you never have to put it into action, but I'm confident that if you are, I think you're ready. So, okay, so as we talked about number 3, going on a trip. We talked about a convention for road paving techniques and right for the head and source. There's some little detail in this question, and my whole point was to sift through some of that detail. But I just want to make sure that, is the question clear and is the response, or the response is clear?
We got the answer right, so it must be clear.
All right.
That's my determining factor.
Okay. But I do, so, and when you do the quiz, when you select A, this comes up with a description. So the person taking the test will be able to see it, and they'll be able to read that, and they'll see some of that nuance too. That's why we go through the explanation. The travel has to be related to business, if they're staying anything beyond, it's on their mind. So the employee or whoever gets the benefit of what's in the benefit. The fourth one is, this one, talking about a seminar that's being held in Springfield, and Private Source offers airfare lodging. And then it's really focusing on the meals. I was tempted to put in, but no doggy bags, but I never went too much. Section, can we move on? Okay. Section 3 is just dealing with sexual harassment, the prohibition of sexual harassment. Just for your reference, when this was crafted, we tried to parallel, to the extent practical, with the county's personnel manual, because it has its own sexual harassment in it. And as an employee, I'm subject to both. So I wanted to make sure that when we developed this and put this in the ordinance, that there were parallels to those. So the theory is, as you take this ethics test, and then you take your sexual harassment training, that should be repetitive. Any issues, questions with how it's presented?
No, I just got a question on the law. Maybe Ken, is it Kent or Ken?
Oh, Tom.
I'm sorry, maybe he can answer it. Does the harassment have to be based on sex?
I don't believe.
The reason I ask that is, if you tell a dirty joke to both a male and a female, you are not harassing them based on sex. And the reason and at least I thought that's what Title VII required.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
So, on the screen, make it a little bit bigger, on the prohibited conduct, sexually suggestive jokes, gestures, or sounds directed towards another, or sexually oriented or degrading comments about another. This is gender neutral.
Gender neutral.
So you
Yeah.
understand that, yeah?
Tom tells me an off-color joke, I don't like that. Keeps telling me that joke, I have to say, it's prohibited conduct. So it's,
I understand. That's what I just asked the question.
good question. Appreciate it. But it's, when we go into the quiz, we have one about jokes. So, as you can see, and this is a great example because Tom can tell me, 3 or 4 jokes, and I yuck it up with them, and finally say, Tom, I don't like it, no more. As soon as I say no more, that becomes prohibited conduct. Just because I was accepting of it before, doesn't mean predetermined myself to be always accepted to it. So, any questions on any of the quizzes?
I mean, number 3, I never even answered, I just put a question mark by it, because that one definitely, I understand the explanation now that I see it, but that one obviously,
I had an issue with creepy as well.
yeah, made me kind of go like, wait, what are we talking about here? And like, it wasn't really clear to me what the answer should be there, yeah. For whatever reason.
All right.
Yeah, and I guess when you say, well, it makes you uncomfortable, it is not sexual harassment. I mean, I guess the problem is like not clear that it is sexual harassment either.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it could be depending on what the creepy behavior really was.
Right.
Which is probably why I just put a question mark, like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
I guess it was not explicit enough to feel like I could answer positively one way or another.
Doesn't seem sexual to me for some guy to be creepy.
The problem
Well,
becomes,
Yeah.
is it actually a foul behavior, or is the person who's offended, is it something about them that makes them extra hypersensitive? And
Right. Because this person's behavior reminds them of an uncle that was a bad guy, or whatever. Like I don't know. Like it doesn't. It just kind of. I feel almost like that's kind of a gotcha question, but
because it could be something as innocent as somebody saying, "Hey, can I buy you a candy bar?" And you take extreme offense at that because it feels creepy to you. So it feels creepy to you, but everything isn't about you.
yeah.
Well, it's not supposed to be. It is today.
I was gonna say.
So would it make it different if it said that it makes you feel uncomfortable? So when you read, I think what this question's trying to get at is that the list is not all, the list that's on the previous page, that there's a lot of other things, right? It could be just, call me a girl. Maybe girls want to go out. Some women don't like to be called girls anymore. And maybe uncomfortable is the wrong word too, but, something that these other sorts of types of sexual harassment that are not direct.
The thing I like about the word creepy is it comes up a lot, And it could be the way, it could be like a leering look, looking too long, getting into personal space, things that other people are purposely doing to someone to gaslight them. And that, so it would at least warrant attention. They'd have to have something to open that conversation, Because otherwise, it puts the person into a situation of hostile, well, I don't know, they're coworkers, so hostile work environment. I mean, it can, oh gosh, and it's just so litigious. So I would want to have it be like, this is training, right? So you're putting it out there that creepy is a word that will be defined by the person who's using the word creepy, right? And there's so many things that go into that, so.
Maybe it's just like the last sentence you say, therefore, while makes you uncomfortable, it is not sexual harassment. I think that's maybe where I got hung up. I'm like, well, I don't know, it could be, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or false. So maybe it should say something like, you know, could this behavior be considered sexual harassment, yes or no? And then it's like, well, it could be, yes. Then it would be clearly be, yes, it could be, but it's not.
So and I think that might be a simple fix for this. Rather than true, false, just make it yes or no. And maybe I just say, you know, while it makes you uncomfortable, is, could this be, and I guess I really want to sub down this is almost kind of leading. How about you don't see anything after that clearly indicates this is sexual harassment? So I say it does not clearly indicate it. Yeah, how do we connect this portion of the questions? Because it's not clearly indicated it's sexual harassment.
Maybe just say, however, could it still be considered sexual harassment or something?
Oh, so how about this? But, yeah, but could it be? Yeah, but could it be? But
Yeah, I
could it
think
be
it's actually
this?
pretty clear.
Could it be?
Yeah, I'm reading it again. I just didn't know if everybody would identify with creepy, but I guess it is.
Oh, yeah. It's the worst. It's the worst.
Or could it be?
And then we just say yes and no. Yes. Oh. And no. And then the correct answer is
Yes.
A. Yes.
Okay, go back up to 3, because you said but could be, and it should say but could it be? Yeah, I think that makes it more clear, because now you know we're kind of talking about maybe a little bit of a gray area, rather than an absolute, like, it isn't sexual harassment.
And the intent of the question, I think, as Terry mentioned, is really just to be cautionary. For anybody taking this, they can say, well, maybe they're going to be mindful of their actions. Well, wait a minute.
When people are being gaslit, it really puts them off. And what I mean is they could be very tentative about taking action that really needs to be taken. And so I think in the training, covering something like that, because a lot of times predatory people are doing these things that you can't quite put your finger on, but they're creepy. And I just had a thing recently, and the word creepy came up. And I was thinking to myself, how do you define creepy?
Well, but it's got to be unwelcome as well. So the employee should be saying, get out of my space, to use one of your examples.
But that's the whole thing with people who gaslight. They're always just on the other side of that line where you can't quite put your finger on it. And they know what they're doing. They do. A lot of predatory people do. So I'm not talking about the calling gals girls or anything like that. You know, I think that this is an important area. It's it's the most, what do you call it? But just that subliminal, it's
Subtle.
pretty, yeah, subtle. It's,
It sounds like you're saying it makes the person who's the victim second guess themselves.
oh,
Is this about me?
absolutely, and that's
So
the
it's-
purpose.
Right.
Yeah, so, and so this would give somebody just a thought,
Mhm.
they're going through this training, so.
That, no, that was the whole thought of this
Yeah,
question. is-
the person who's complaining about girls versus, I don't know what, would be, they're the overt people that are looking for things to complain about, you know what I mean, they're going after something. That's not this, this is that. Normal person who now has a predator doing something, but they can't quite put their finger on any specific incident, so.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of opinion, right? A lot of people are
Mhm.
offended by so many things nowadays, and I think that's the question maybe helps with that, you know, if you're feeling offended, that's the point that, you know, you should bring it forward.
But it's also got to be unwelcome, you know? I mean, to Dawn's point, if the person is particularly sensitive,
Well,
how's the harasser to know that it's unwelcome?
well,
Well, that's kind of spelled out actually in the training. So, you know, repeated unwelcome flirting, just talk about unwelcome. And once again, as I point out too, some things that were welcomed yesterday
Can be
may be
unwelcome.
unwelcome
Yeah.
today.
20 years from
So with these changes though, does that clarify the question?
I understand.
It's 4:30. Kathy, if you want, I can finish up with okay. And I'll leave it up to the chair if we want to continue on or if we want to.
Yeah, I think we're almost done. I actually don't have anything on the next set of questions, and then that's it, so.
I mean, on the training section 4.
I thought that was clear.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have anything on section 4?
No.
All right. Then with those changes, I will, we'll call this complete, or we'll have our training revised. And there was a question.
Should I have it?
Yeah, if you want to make a motion to approve this. there's-
Have a motion to approve the ethics ordinance training with the changes noted?
So moved.
I'll second.
Oh, Vanessa?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Vanessa, I think you asked a question about page numbers on this. And I'm sorry to respond, because of the way it's formatted, I think it's loaded up into our
Oh, the training.
online training module. It's the page numbers would, I really can't put them on, anyway.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Put my own page numbers.
Did you? I just thought, well, if we started referring to pages, I would be like, oh, really?
All right.
Before we adjourn, when was the last time there was ever a complaint filed with the commission?
A couple of years ago, and it was, I think within the past, I'm going to say 2 years, and it was dismissal.
Pardon? It was dismissed. I defended it. It was not filed.
Okay.
What was the section you asked?
We've had other people file, but they were
So,
just,
I was just curious.
also sua sponte, I guess, because they just didn't meet the qualifications, yeah.
correct, like we got, like,
Just recently, we had the one, yeah,
that's right, yes, that's right, yeah.
the public defender one.
Right.
Which I still have a question, that I'm hoping, I would keep hoping, Nor wasn't here last time, and now he's not here again this time, but just the whole question about, is a public defender covered by the ethics ordinance?
They're.
We had a hard time finding that, yeah.
Not ours. They're still, like the state's attorney.
Is not.
He's not subject to this.
Sure.
But he is subject to the state statute that he referenced. And then the courts have their own ethics ordinance, which the public defender I believe falls either, they're gonna fall either under the courts because the public defenders are actually under the courts,
Okay,
or under that state statute. So they're not immune to it, they're not exempt from it.
but they're not under ours.
Not under
Because that
ours.
was the case that, the
Yes.
complaint that we had, but, yeah, I mean, you've been doing this, obviously, you were a commission member for a long time,
That's right.
so how many years have you been doing this total?
I think I came on the commission about 2005 or so.
And how many actual hearings have you actually had?
1, 2, 3, I must say 3 sufficiency of what we call them cause examinations. Maybe 4.
Did anything ever actually go to hearing?
Nothing with a hearing.
And all the time.
And keep in mind, prior to the sua sponte tool, everything that was filed had to go to this commission. Which means, and you saw this process being weaponized during, especially during political season. File a complaint against your political candidate, front page of Northwest Herald, the big splash, it's really much ado about nothing, or not even warranted, but the damage is done. So you saw that happen, not in every one of those cases, but, arguably, some would say that was the motive, was the splash, and, the damage is done. So sua sponte really helps avoid that now. So that tool's good. What I can't say though is just because somebody files a complaint with my office, it doesn't mean they already sent it to the Northwest Herald.
Right.
I can't control them.
Okay, so moving on the agenda, I mean, any other comments from members, any future topics? Do we have anything in mind?
So and I would be open if there's something that, 'cause you've been learning a lot about this process, and you can see it's not a simple process. If there's any areas in particular that you want to focus in on to better understand, we can work with the state's attorney's office to give you some in-depth, study. There's a lot of parts of the process that you might, what does that mean, how does that work, and how would that play out? We're happy to do so. I have mock cases, and that's always a fallback, is to do a mock case. So I'm thinking we typically would be, it's probably in the fall sometime, and I can schedule,
How many meetings are we supposed to have in
typically I think 3 times a year, or as needed. If the complaint's filed, then you're called into action.
here? Right.
But it's, I don't
It's right
think,
here somewhere.
You guys only 3 last year.
The commission will meet 2 times per year at a regularly scheduled date and time unless the chairperson determines that there's no business to conduct. So,
we typically have
2, 3, 5.
I mean, and I'll leave it up to you if you wanted to meet again in October. Here's what I'll say, I mean, because, there's such a time between the meetings, it's just going to keep it fresh. I go through it, even to do mock cases, just to do training, because if a complaint lands on the desk and it's go time, you
Right.
want to be as well prepared as possible. So if we target something maybe in October,
It's October's a good time.
all right. I'll send out, we'll kind of hone in on a date, but if anything, like I said, I'm open to suggestions. If there's things that you want to learn more or dive into, we can do that. If not, I can file a mock case and let's have some fun.
Okay, perfect.
Is there a process to ask a question of the state's attorney when there's a filing, to ask a question of the state's attorney's office to say, give us an opinion on whether or not this is sexual harassment, as an example?
So when we talked about on the,
Talking about a hearing officer.
yeah,
I'm
so
talking about not going through that expense for the state.
to the state,
What's the law?
they're your attorney, so yes.
We can ask them
You
anything
can-
we want.
You can ask them, and that's where, when we talked about the process of, you may have to get more information. What was it? Oh, and the sufficiency review, is there a preliminary action? It may be a legal question, and they say, help us understand this, and the state's attorney opinion on this. A great example of a complaint that was filed was using the county seal on literature campaign, and whether or not that would constitute prohibited political activity. That rose to the commission, it was ultimately was dismissed. But the question was, is that county property? The state's attorney actually did a review and provided a recommendation and said, really, in theory, no, it's not. It's public domain. We can't trademark, that seal. But is there something that the county board can do, to limit that? And it gets really squishy. So, but the state's attorney was asked a legal question about whether or not that was something that was that county property. So that's a good example of where this comes into play. I wish I would have thought of that. All right, so with that, we'll look at October.
Yep. We just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.